and welcome to the Smarter Building podcast powered by Symmetry. On today's show, we'll be talking about something a little bit different to our usual, and that's the world of remote working. Since COVID, remote working started to make its way into many industries, even some of those where working from home would have previously been seen as maybe impossible, like construction. For instance, we saw the rise of technologies like visual project progress tracking, which removes the physical need for project managers to be on site full time. Now, whilst remote working offers many obvious benefits to the environment, etc., it also has its downsides in a constantly evolving digital era. So today, we're joined by Richard McGuinness from HP, who has seen firsthand how businesses have successfully implemented and adopted remote working infrastructures and what they can perhaps look like for the architecture, engineering and construction industry specifically. So welcome, Richard. It's great to have you.
Thank you. Thank you, Nicole. Thanks to Symmetry and thanks for the invitation.
No problem. So based on that intro, are there any initial thoughts on what we have just touched on?
Oh, it's a big subject, isn't it? It's a massive. It's probably one of the biggest changes probably in most of the workforces over the last number of years. Obviously, I'm quite old now. I've always been to work Monday to Friday in offices and the way I always used to work. And the technology was always very difficult to work from home. Data. How do I move my data from where it is to home, for example? How do they use? How do I know the guys are actually doing their work? So there were a lot of different things around those type of things. But obviously, COVID has obviously dramatically changed things. But the good thing these days is, I think a number of years ago, trying to replicate what you had in the office at home was extremely difficult. Now the task is kind of around the other way. How do I replicate the setup I have at home and have that in the office? And the good news is we've got answers for both of them. So, but it's definitely a very much a moving target and a changing landscape. So it's for technology companies, that's a good opportunity for us. So we're in the right place, which is good.
And before we delve any deeper into that topic, could you just introduce yourself to our listeners and tell us a bit about your background professionally and personally?
You don't want to know the personal stuff. I'm from Essex, so there's probably there'll be too much there. But professionally, I've been very fortunate. I've been at HP for 7 years now. So I work for what's known as the ACS team, so the Advanced Compute Specialist team. So my job is just talking to end users. That's a great thing. I look after kind of manufacturing, media, as well as architecture. Before HP, I spent 25 years working in post-production and film. So working at Pinewood Studios for a company called Avid, and working in both the reseller space as well as the software manufacturer space. So I did a lot of work in 3D, so things like the Potter films and so forth. So been involved in media and VFX for a lot of that time. And then around about 20 years ago, started to get involved in architecture as architectural visualization was starting to take off. So taking CG images, single camera fly-throughs, giving clients an idea about what their space will look like. And, now we're seeing the merging of those two industries. So for me, on a personal level, it's great because I'm able to, advise customers on some of the techniques that are being used in film. And also vice versa in some instances as well. So it's a nice thing to be in. So I'm very lucky. I've been doing this for 30 odd years now, so I've been very fortunate. Been around the world, obviously, with the film industry, and it's really nice to see. Not my hometown. London isn't my hometown, but if you look around the building I'm in now, the building that all the buildings that are around Liverpool Street and around the city, we've got some lovely buildings here as well. So it's nice to be involved in kind of both sides of it.
That industry, yes. Did you say you'd been involved in some of the Potter films? Did I hear?
Yeah. So obviously, I used to work as a consultant to all of the big visual effects companies. So that's building out big render farms, big storage infrastructures, as well as the workstations and the applications that are used. I used to work for one of the big 3D applications back in the day, which was a product called Softimage. So that was used on all the big films. So I was there very much at the start, and was and only recently left there, kind of 7 years ago, to come and work at HP.
So quite a difference in industry then, I guess. And so, what kind of drew you to the architecture and manufacturing sort of side?
Okay. Well, I started off dealing with Foster and Partners. So, Foster's had a head of visualization, a very good friend of mine, Gamma Basra, who was really interested to see how you could take film techniques and then move them across into the architectural visualization space. So he, was very much a founder of or not founder, I would say, sorry, just someone that was really interested to know how film worked. Obviously, I got to know him very well. And then, the great thing was I could introduce him to people in the film industry that actually maybe could, at the end of the day, as opposed to it being a furry character flying through the air, it's a building, and that building may or may not even be there at the moment. So it's kind of using those film techniques, back in the day, going up in helicopters to actually film the site where the new building's going to be, and then going through the change, much like you would in film. Most of those characters aren't real, and they're not really there. And it was nice to be involved at the very early stages with a very forward-thinking company like they were. And then that kind of then by default leads you to other opportunities. You get introduced to other people, and just it becomes quite granular because you're kind of working with lots of different people in that area.
Excellent.
So it's good fun.
I can imagine, yeah. And so we've personally seen that HP have been ramping up their efforts around remote working solutions. Would you say you've seen a higher demand for solutions to suit this in the AEC industry more recently, and maybe what has actually caused this?
Sure. Well, we've had it for a long time, believe it or not. So a lot of we used to have a product that shipped with every workstation called Remote Boost. That had been around for 10 years, and it had been utilized a lot in the film industry, especially because they moved to what we call centralize their workstations a long time ago. That means, in effect, put all their workstations into racks, either put them in their own data center or a third-party data center. So really, that's the start of centralization. They used it for different reasons. Obviously, we weren't in a COVID world there. That was just the fact that they could have their compute very, very close to their storage, which could be very, very close to their network infrastructure. So giving everybody speed improvements. Since COVID, obviously, we've seen a huge spike in that. One of the reasons behind it is that not every single person's in the office 5 days a week. So, some customers are insisting that their people are in a couple of days a week, other a little bit more flexible. And it's going to be an interesting one to see how all businesses do that in the future, because, there will be a drive for more and more people to work from home, because obviously it suits potentially their lifestyle a lot better. There will be people that want to be in the office. And I think as a business, that's the challenge. How do I give them that same experience in the office and at home? So what we can do, with what we would consider a remote working style setup, a centralized computer and so forth, is give that same experience to the user. And from a data perspective, not be in any danger that, the data stays in one place. We're not moving data around. We're just moving pixels. So, that's the simplicity of the systems, is that, if I'm working at home and I'm working on a big file, the file still resides within my company's network. It's not on my computer at home. So, that's the good thing about this. That means your users can actually be anywhere.
And I guess that kind of relates a lot to the construction industry, because they're having to work on loads of big files and sharing data around. So it's really key for them to have that experience of sharing it from the office out into the field. So are there any examples that you could touch on around that side of things in the construction or architecture industry a bit more?
Yeah, sure. I've got a machine here. I've got a workstation here. Look, that's a machine. So this is my favorite little machine in the world, because the reason being is that I've been around a long time and I've carried lots of workstations, Nicole. This one, I can put 3 of them in a rucksack, so it's quite nice. This is a machine called a Z2 Mini. We've done very well with Symmetry, working with customers like Bryden Wood, with customers like Chapman BDSP. This is a Revit workstation. So with these styles of machines, you can see it's not very big. Because it's not very big, we can centralize it very easy. We can put it in a rack. We could put it on the back of a screen. We can put it in lots and lots of different places. And that's been something that we've really has appealed to architectural companies, especially because we have a sustainability message within there as well. And it's not a sustainability message that you would ordinarily consider as being a sustainability message. We often look at things like plastics and cardboard and all of those types of things. This device is more about the amount of physical power it takes. It takes probably a third of the power that a traditional desk-side workstation would take. So, what the architects have really liked about that is that message there that we can drive the same compute and graphics power for a third of the physical power. So the users are not losing anything in terms of their overall performance. The business is gaining a lot because obviously their power is expensive. And if we also can cut the amount of power we're using, that's a better situation to be in for everybody. The other thing they like is, to say, that experience that those machines can be held within either their own building. They could move them to a third-party data center. We can manage them really easily, very simply managed. We have a product called the Anywhere RSC controller, which gives customers the ability to manage all of those machines in a rack through a single pane of glass interface. So again, even if your users are remote, sometimes your IT guys can be remote as well. So it's not always going to be the easiness, the simplicity for them to come in and fix a machine that traditionally was under a desk. Yeah. By moving them into a data center, either your own or a third party one, again, we can have these machines remotely managed as well. So it does really create a lot of opportunity. And I think one of the big things for the construction industry is the ability to get more and more people on projects quicker, maybe, but also to expand the project. When you're in a tradition, pre-COVID, if I could fit 500 people in my building, that's all I could fit in, even if I have a project that it required more. With this type of workflow, I could still have my 500 people in the building, but I could also have 500 people remotely. So, actually you can grow your business as well. And the restrictions are not there. The data is going to be secure. We're going to give the users really good performance. And as I say, all that we're going to be moving to the user working from home are just purely pixels rather than data.
Yeah, I was just about to touch on sort of, more project type work, but I think you sort of covered it there. Does that differ in any way because they're on like shorter time scales, or how does it work in terms of that sort of agility?
Yeah, really. I mean, what we can do these days is, to say, a customer could have 3 different sets of computer, if you like, or what we would call a user persona. So maybe a Revit user, a 3ds Max user, and maybe a Twinmotion user. And we can have those kind of tiers of workstations still within those racks. And then we use something called a brokering system. And that brokering system can just say, today I'm on that little machine you saw there, the Z2 Mini. But that might not be powerful enough for me for everything that I need to do this afternoon, as an example. And what we can do within brokering is very easily tap on me as a username, tap on the machine that's available, and click and connect me to it. Mm-hmm. So I've not moved, but actually in the background, my computer has changed.
Yeah.
So, giving the power to the user when they need it, as opposed to maybe giving it to them all of the time. And it's something that the film industry does a lot with. And again, that ability to, for users in different locations as well, to maybe use that powerful machine. So maybe I have this powerful machine in London. I've got a user in Newcastle. The old way would be to ship the machine up to them in Newcastle for them to use it. Now, very simply, by just using some remote protocols, I can now connect to that machine very quickly and very easily.
Excellent. And you touched on Twinmotion there, and it leads on to sort of the next point. So I think you mentioned before the kind of synergies between the media world and now the AEC world in terms of visualization. Is there anything you could maybe expand on, or that you can kind of see coming up in the future on that kind of thing?
Definitely. I think the AEC industry is really moving forward quickly, certainly with the amount of It's applications now, such as Twinmotion. Twinmotion is really skyrocketing in terms of its install base. Obviously, VR, AR, they're subjects that have been around and utilised a lot. But I see things like virtual production. I see things like material scanners, those type of things starting to come in more and more and more, because I think the power of the image is such a good thing. And also for both clients, for planning, for all those elements, you think you can take that one image and reutilize it in a lot of different ways. And as I say, in the olden days, what we did was we created a walkthrough, which was almost a throwaway item at the end of it. You couldn't really do much with it. Nowadays, that data that you're starting off, that the architects are using, just gets reutilized and more and more. I've seen architects going up in helicopters, as I mentioned earlier, to do shoots of particular areas, so that we could show you where what the area was like pre the building, what it's going to look like, and then when it comes back down again afterwards. So I think the visualization element is getting more and more like film. So, and I think now, and that pushes the demand kind of down the stack a little bit more. So, it can't always be done in visualization, because you'll always be waiting for the viz team. I think now the graphics are getting better and better at the base level, and products like Twinmotion are pushing that up even further. Whereas I think traditionally that would be something that you would send out to another company to have done on your behalf, maybe to a post-production house. Yeah, there was a lot of synergy between post-production houses and architects, because maybe the architect team didn't quite have the size of visualization team that they needed to deliver a project, so they would take it to a post-production house. And I think now you're seeing more and more of this type of work being done internally. Virtual production, I think, is a big one. I'll be really interested to see. I've already worked on one project which was utilizing virtual production with real props. So they had a real example of a staircase, how this staircase would look in a particular building, but they were using a virtual production set to show the actual building, what the building's going to look like. So I think more and more we'll see more of that, because, say, from a location perspective, from a visualizer, say we can take all that data that's been created and then just move it across into a virtual production set. And so that's a really interesting one for me.
Excellent. And I think you've probably just touched on this, but are there any sort of exemplary examples that you touched on, having that same experience outside of the office, out into at home? What are there any examples from any other industries that are really doing this well?
Yeah, media is the first one. So obviously in London, London's fortunate that we have some of the best architects in the world, and we have some of the best media production companies in the world. Lucky for me, it's on my doorstep, so it is fantastic. The media industry, for sure, for those, obviously during COVID, media, more and more content was needed. The industry itself was very heavily regulated, because you can imagine you don't need any releases of images going out early before, there was a Sony hack many years ago and a film was ruined, and that cost a lot of money. So there was always a little bit of a resistance in the industry for people to work from home on very high budget projects. We needed content during COVID. Some of those restrictions started to drop. And actually what we had seen pre the writer's strike, obviously, because that slightly changed things, but pre-writer's strike, you were seeing companies actually expand rather than contract. And, as I say, that limitation that they had previously on their building space, the amount of desks they had, because they had now centralized their compute, they had remote users working, they could take on users from anywhere. And that really did help. And I think previously you were reliant on people that lived in the UK, had all the qualifications to work in the UK. There was the element of travel, all those type of things. London's not a cheap place to travel around. And what was happening was, I think they were losing some of these potential users. With this type of setup nowadays, as I say, my user can be anywhere.
Yeah.
And, what we have in a lot of instances is some of the big post-production houses is machines that are used in London from, 9 till 5 are great. And then at 5 till 12, they're used in LA. Mm-hmm. Same machine, the machine hasn't moved. So it's just being flexible with your IP. there are so many good reasons to centralize, to give people potential speed improvements on their network, because if you think about it, you're not having to recable a whole floor.
Yeah.
If you put your machines into a machine room. So there are a lot of advantages to do it. And I think that the media industry is one of the closest ones. I've seen it in manufacturing. Again, that centralized, that remote workers, they don't want to restrict themselves to the people that because, competition, the world's a competitive place. And if I have competition and they see that I'm saying I need my worker, my designers in 5 days a week, and my competition says, well, actually, you only have to come in a day a week, then they've already got an advantage against you. So I think employers have to be a little bit flexible. There are always going to be some projects due to the nature of them that would have to be kind of very secret and maybe have to have that style of workforce. But again, we can make sure that that data is secure anyway and push those pixels to those users. So as I say, it's going to be an interesting one going forward. But the other thing that customers can do is they can look at the size of their own buildings and decide, well, actually, do we need this bigger building? Could we maybe go into different locations or so forth? It gives you a lot of flexibility going forward.
And you just touched on manufacturing industry there. Are there any key differences you've seen from your experience between how they operate in terms of remote working when compared with AEC?
Yeah, they don't like it. Again, a manufacturer, depends if you've got the actual plant where you're working or you're designing. So I deal with various different manufacturers, and there was one that mandated them all to be back in the office 5 days a week. It's a difficult situation. I think it depends on your job role. Obviously, if you're in a manufacturing, if you're a designer working for some type of car manufacturer or truck or so forth, I think you're very much like an AEC user, very much like a media user. You're using a CAD application. I think that's less of an issue. If you're working on the actual production line, it's going to be a bit more difficult. Yeah. So I think manufacturing and also defense comes under that as well, are two of the industries that, a little bit more traditional. I think if you looked at the defense market segment, customers like BAE, they make submarines, you're not going to be able to generally, that is very top secret information. So I think there's always going to be a reluctance against change. So, but we'll see. I think, again, goes back to the other scenario. I think if more and more people, more and more employees offer future employees a bit more flexibility in the way they're going to work, it might change some of the others.
Is there anything more you think these industries can do to kind of encourage it? Or is it the fact that they don't know about the infrastructure that's needed? What do you think it is that scares people around it?
I think that from a technology standpoint, the good thing is I can deliver the same performance to your desktop whether you're in the office or out the office. So I think that bit's very, pretty easy. I can also show you, a pathway, hopefully that you'll be able to follow for a number of years from your technology infrastructure's perspective. I think the difficulty is outside of that is we all don't know, how long leases are held for, what this is held for, the business things that come in there, and I think that's something that that a lot of us are not aware of. Business may have taken a lease for 10 years on the property and so forth, so they have to make that return, otherwise they can have a significant loss there. But I think from the technology standpoint, the good thing is we can give you that same performance wherever you are, and pretty much wherever you are in the world as well. This is not restricted to in country. We know from some testing that we've done recently with a data center is we can ping as far as Germany from a UK-based data center. Of course, it matters a lot what the guy's doing down the other end. Yeah. But also think about another way is that one of the first things that goes into a construction site is an internet connection. It's so important, so fundamental for everything from stock to deliveries to people. What we could have is that scenario where the guy is on site with something like a Chromebook looking at the drawings of something that's going to happen. And actually that data and that machine is in their building. So, if he lost it, his car got broken into, all of those things that may or may not happen, leaving it in a rucksack and down the pub or something, which has often happened, doesn't it? I think you have to be in the government to be able to do that, though, don't you? But, it has happened. Or just drop it. Imagine you just dropped it and broke it, for example. So I think there's going to be changing changing workflows and how people do it. But I think each company is going to be slightly different, and I think each company will be. Oh, the lights are on it. Yeah, there we go. And each company is, let's see, look, we do sustainability lighting and it goes off after a certain time if you're not moving. Perfect timing, yeah. So I think it's going to differ. I think, each company will differ. And I think there is a lot to be said for collaborative working, but there's also a lot to be said for productivity. So I think it's going to be interesting to see where we are in 2 years, I think, Nicole.
And just touching on something else you sort of mentioned to me earlier, in terms of robots, and I think you showed us a little robot in your office. It's stuff like, I know you mentioned things like that was kind of used a lot during COVID. What about things like that in today's hybrid world? Could things like that, do you think in 2 years' time, you say, would we see more robotics and things like that out on sites and stuff like that in terms of infrastructure and data?
I'm not sure myself. We use the robots here for things like showing people around the customer demo centers and things, because obviously people, we can always send you spec sheets, and spec sheets are great, but you can't look at a spec sheet. It doesn't give you a kind of, it's a bit more difficult. Even though we had the robot here had a really good camera on it, you can actually show people the devices a little bit better. So the nice thing was we were able to do that during lockdown. It was a little bit of a gimmick. It was quite funny, but at the same time, it just helped us. It helps us with certain customers in certain situations. I mean, obviously, you look at the world of warehousing nowadays, there's a lot of robotics in warehousing. There's a lot of robotics coming in everywhere. So, where we'll be in 2 years' time, I'm not sure, but the pace of development is strong, isn't it? So we'll see where we're at there. All right.
Excellent. And so as we wrap up, is there any exciting developments or upcoming projects that our listeners should be on the lookout for from HP or you personally?
Always. So, there'll be a lot coming out next year. We're just about to launch a number of new AMD platforms, so really high core count machines. We're about to, the little machine I just showed you just now is about to get a new upgrade to it in the next month or so, and that's where I was this morning at an architect showing him it and looking at benchmarking and so forth. There's also a number of kind of on-demand projects that are on the go at the moment, which are not going to be not released just yet. There might be some scanning projects. There's quite a lot going to be coming in the next period of time. From a hardware perspective, it's pretty exciting. It's through my career, when I started, thought of having a 96-core CPU in a workstation was something you never dreamed of, and the reality is they're here now. So, there's those type of things, but it's constantly moving, it's constantly evolving. We've got Intel and AMD in the CPU world, which are obviously there's good competition there. So that means that the actual customer is going to get a better product, which is a good thing. NVIDIA are doing lots of good things in and around graphics cards. We're doing lots of good things around making our computers smaller and smaller and smaller, so that we can, get them a lot more dense machines in what we call per U or per rack space. We already own the protocol to send the pixels to the endpoint. We're doing a lot around manageability and so forth as well. So, yeah, there's a lot coming. There's a lot
coming. We'll have to catch up again in 2 years' time.
Yeah, I'll be a robot then. With a really silly haircut. Yeah. So, but yeah, it'll be a robot here, not me. Yeah. It'll be Richard in AI, cool. A robotic AI. So, yeah.
100%.
Do what the writers are doing, Nicole. Make sure you on your contract says my digital image is mine. Because we could be two robots talking to each other in a few years' time.
I wouldn't be surprised, honestly. But yeah, any last sort of points before we wrap this up?
I would just say from my perspective, seeing media, seeing AEC, seeing a lot of the different markets there, AEC is certainly in the UK is a big market for us. So I think it's a big market for both of us. So I'm really genuinely excited about, the next 2 or 3 years in that segment and see how well remote working, where we are in 3 years' time. I think we know the answers, but it will be good to know if we were right. But having said that, I think still there's a lot of opportunity out there with from construction to housing to buildings and so forth. I think it's a good industry to be in. I think it's an industry that adopts technology, which is great. So let's see where we are in a few years' time.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for joining us today, Richard. Great insights. And we'll look forward to catching up with you in a few years from our AI virtual reality bodies.
Yeah. Well, hopefully then I get my lights won't still keep going off, will they?
That won't be an issue ever. Yeah.
Cool. Lovely. Thank you for inviting me, and thank you for your time.